Hey everyone, it's your favorite rogue Chirpy, here again with another video. This time, I'll be doing commentary over a plus 23 tyrannical Azure Vault. This run was done with a complete pug group with no comms whatsoever. If you want to see live content like this, be sure to check out the stream at twitch.tv/chirpytv. Now let's get on to the build. This is the build that I used for the plus 23 Azure Vault. We have Tricks of the Trade, Nimble Fingers, Iron Stomach, and you notice I don't go into Numbing Poison, Trophic Poison, or Fleeted Footwork here. And the reason for that is I wanted Iron Stomach for the extra Crimson Vial healing for the second boss during the intermission phase, ideally. And I could have taken a Utility Poison here to go into Numbing, but I opted not to, just because we had a lot of AoE stops, and I felt like it would be pretty easy for us to get those stops without needing the Utility Poison of Numbing. On this side of the tree, I don't have greenskins, and I have 1 point in CTO. The rest is a pretty standard M+ build. I keep getting a lot of people asking me whether it's worth it to drop Heavy Hitter for a 2nd point in CTO, and it might make the class feel better getting double the duration of Count the Odds buffs and double the chance of getting them, but for me, dropping this guaranteed 10% increased damage on your combo generating points is not worth it. I'd rather have the guaranteed damage on our biggest damage contributors than a % chance at getting more damage. So that's my take on that. And now let's go to the itemization. This is the items that I was running for the plus 23 Azure Vault. I'm running a Controlled Current Technique and a Storm Eater's Boon. Storm Eater's Boon is pretty difficult to use in Azure Vault in my opinion, but there are some decent places where you can use it if you have good timing. And I'll be going over those good timing areas when we get into the video, so be sure to watch out for that if you're a Storm Eater's Boon enjoyer like me. I'm using a Crit Mastery ring on my 2nd ring slot just because I don't have anything better. If I had a Crit Burst ring, I'd be using that instead. I have the Aeronog ring on my 1st ring slot that works with the Flaring Cowl, which is a Spark crafted piece. And then I have my 4-piece on, and crafted bracers for Engineering B-Res, which actually does come in handy and saves the run in this key. So watch for that too. And my stats here, I'll click off my Buzzing Runes so you can see what my actual stats are. I have 35% crit, 5% haste, 26% mastery, 21% burst, and 12% avoidance. I have avoidance enchants on my cloak, I have avoidance tertiary on my chest and my boon, and I have the avoidance enchant on my bracers, and that brings me up to 12%. That 12% avoidance in combination with the feint ability will make it so you can pretty much live every AoE instance that happens all the time. So if you can get avoidance enchants on your gear, even if you don't have any tertiary avoidance gear, it's still worth it to put those enchants on. You'll take a lot less AoE damage overall. So this is the route that the tank brought into the dungeon. This isn't the most favorite route that I've done in Azure. I really like the 100% trash route before 2nd boss, but, you know, the tank brings it in, he's comfortable with the route, you adapt, and that's how you get better. So this is our 1st pull, 2nd pull, 3rd pull, and then you jump down, you grab all the trees, go to slimes. After that, we shroud through, so you can walk by all these guys are just in stone, and these guys just see things, so you just gotta move in between the circles. We shroud through these, we go on this side, we double pull, and then afterwards we jump down over here towards the 2nd boss, and you can land on this platform, you can see in the video. And then after that we take the book back over, we kill this double pull, go back over again, which, I mean, we could have just jumped down through the ring. I got baited by the way that the monk jumped, so we could have just jumped straight down into the ring from the outside. But anyways, we go in here, we pull all that trash, do Azure, and then we went and did all the frogs, which I really hate doing. I think the frogs and just the travel time alone is kind of hell. But we made it work, and then we had some big shenanigans on 3rd boss, and then 4th boss was pretty free. I get a lot of questions regarding what my Weakauras, add-ons, and macros that I'm using are. I have videos of all of those on my channel, and the link for all those are in the description and on your screen right now during this. So if you're interested in those, check out those videos. You could also join the Discord. I have links to everything in there as well. Thank you guys so much. As usual, to make this a little bit more enjoyable for you guys, I'm going to be running the video at ×2 speed. And let's get on to the dungeon. So we're going to start here by pulling this entire room by triggering the whelps. I set my focus target to star so I can make sure I kick the Mystic Vapor Cast on it. and then I'm going to focus one of the Crystal Furies down, because those are the main threats in this pull. We're also trying to make sure that no piercing shard casts go off from the Glacial Furies. It is very important that no piercing shard casts go off. To stop them, you need to use your Kidney Shot, Cheap Shot, War Stomp, or Blind. Ideally, you get them all with AoE stuns because they pretty much always line up with each other. Going to this next pull, we have our tank always kicking the tree, and then again, I'm trying to make sure I get a focus kick on one of the plants. Here, I do end up getting 3 stacks of Mystic Vapor, so I have to use my cloak in order to live. That's fine. This is what happens when you're on no comms, kicks go out, people kick the same target. It's not a good time, but we make it work. Here again, I'm making sure that I am responsible for at least one of these casts, and then hopefully other people get it, because again, no comms, so there's no way to really coordinate who's getting which kick. Hey guys, a lot of you aren't subscribed to the channel. In fact, the vast majority of my viewers are not subscribed. I would really appreciate it if you take the 2 seconds to hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it really helps me out. Thank you guys so much. Here, we walk past these mobs and we jump down. The general rule when you're pugging this room is if you kick the tree, you own that tree now. You're responsible for every kick on that tree. So I see that somebody claims the first tree, so I start attacking the second tree, and I'm claiming that as my kick target. So I'm going to be responsible for this one that has the circle mark on it. Your tank should be pretty much backpedaling this entire room, because the trees put out that puddle, and that puddle actually does a lot of damage if you stand in it. But if you're just backpedaling the whole time, then you never have to take the pool damage, and you're good to go. To avoid spitefuls on this week, you have a couple options as a rogue. You can press evasion, you could kidney, or if you're really good with your spacing, you can actually kill the spiteful because you have acrobatic strikes. So you can hit them in a range that they can't hit you at, but it's very particular and might need a little bit of practice. During this fight, your tank should be aiming to hit as many trees as possible with the stomp, and this tank was actually really Giga Chad about it. Like, he was hitting everything. He had a lot of really good tree breaks that made sure that we didn't really have anything left over ever. So when you get the circle on you to break the trees, you can't really use a defensive on it. If you're low HP, sure, use your feint or something, but then you need to have cloak for the stomp coming afterwards. So this is the circle I'm talking about, the explosive brand. You want to put these circles over the tree and then use your tricks of the trade to make sure your tank gets aggro. I used my boon here, but they were just like too spread out for the deaths, so my cloak didn't really save my life there, but my cheat did, so that's always good. And yeah, we just continue this 2-cycle rotation of tank breaks trees and then everybody else breaks the trees that he didn't break. So here I'm not going to use feint, I'm just going to do that, and then when the stomp comes out, that's when I feint. And that will make sure that I stay healthy, I'm never at risk of dying. If you looked at the HP bars there, I took very low damage compared to everybody else, and that's because of the 12% avoidance and the feint ability. Feint is a very strong ability. You should be using it whenever you can to avoid some AoE damage. Here, I don't even need to get any trees. I was scared to get that one because the circle around you is a little bit bigger than what the appearance is, and I was scared that if I were to go all the way in to get that tree, that I would cleave onto my 2 teammates and then we would just die. So I felt like risking the extra tree damage when he stomps is worth it, rather than potentially killing 2 of my teammates. After the boss, we run down these stairs, and here we're going to avoid these whelps. We don't want to trigger these whelps, we're walking around them, and it won't trigger the stone-formed enemies as long as you don't trigger the whelps. We shroud past these guys, and we take the book over. Okay, there's a lot of information coming up in this next pull, so I'm going to go down to half speed here, so I can try to make sure I get everything covered. So if you are using the Storm Eater's Boon Trinket, as soon as you go into this pull, you need to be popping it right away, right after your first ambush, Storm Eater's Boon. The reason for this is the Curator does an ability that puts these big AoE swirlies on the ground, and if you wait too long to use your boon, you're going to have to waste your cloak to stay alive, and even worse, if you wait too long to use your boon and use cloak, you have a chance of dying anyways, because that's how long the cast is. The second thing to note is this Rune Seal Keeper. He does an ability called Icy Bindings. That is the most important cast to make sure it does not go off in this pack. You can use a kick, a stun, a blind, you just got to use something to stop it. You can see here, I'm having to cloak during my boon, and I get very lucky that these swirlies are not placed on top of me, otherwise I would have died because I did not boon at the right time. Just very unfortunate. The second cast you need to watch out for in this pack are from the arcane boys over there, the arcane elementals. They do a cast called Waking Bane, and if it goes off on a target, it'll put them to sleep. It is dispellable, so is the icy binding, but ideally you don't want either of those to go off, because being stuck on this ring and not being able to move could definitely be somebody's death. So if you have an ability or something that can avoid somebody's death here, if you could have kidneyed a Waking Bane, blinded the icy binding, kicked another Waking Bane, and you didn't do it and somebody died, that's something that you could think about next time you run into this dungeon to make sure that none of those casts go off. I know it's very hard to do all the CCs at the same time as doing your damage, and ideally you'll be using AoE CCs, but if you're playing in a lower IO range and the players aren't necessarily rotating their AoE CCs that well, this is something you can do to try to carry your group, just making sure that people don't die, and it's going to be by kicking the icy bindings, kicking the Waking Banes, stunning this, stunning that, and it's only for these very, very important casts. I just kicked the heavy tome there because there's no real point in letting it go off. There's nothing else to worry about in this pack. Alright, now let's get back on to full speed. In this pull, it's pretty much the same thing. Avoid the swirlies. We have one Crystal Fury guy. That is the guy that does the piercing shard cast, the frontal. You have to make sure you're never in front of those mobs when they're casting, because it is a super wide range. If you saw there the big cone of piercing shards, you can get one shot by that. Not ideal. You should be kidneying, blinding, or making sure somebody else is stopping those casts. The tank can usually take one of those, but multiple, they stack up. It does a lot of damage. So here you see we jump down towards the second boss, so I think we're going in here, and then everybody turns around and goes towards the book. So we end up going backwards into the ring, and we get this double pull going over here. In this pull, it's the same things. We have one Icy Binding boy and a bunch of Waking Bane boys, so I just make sure that I am sticking on to the Icy Binding guy, because that is the most important cast. We also have the Arcane Constructs in this pull, and these guys do an ability called Arcane Bash, I believe. And that is a big frontal that will knock you forward and can knock you off the ring. So you want to stay behind these constructs as much as humanly possible to avoid getting hit by that frontal and either getting one shot by it or getting knocked off the ring. Not ideal. Here you see I just stunned this spiteful. We have to kill the spitefuls before we can take the book back over, because the spiteful puts you in combat and you can't use the book when you are in combat. So now we go over towards the second boss room, and we start killing all these mobs. So we did a really weird lust timing. We lusted a couple pulls back, and I really don't agree with that lust because we are so close to the second boss here. And you really do want lust for this boss on Tyrannical. So I don't really know why we sent our lust at that time. We should have probably done this boss room first before doing the 2-pack in the second ring, just because we had our lust available. So it felt like a really, really weird lust. But you know, it didn't really get in the way of the key too bad, but you really do want lust for this boss on Tyrannical especially. Here, we pull in everything. You can see I set my focus target to the Rune Seal Keeper again, and that is just to make sure no Icy Binding casts go off, but our group's pretty good about it. And a special note about the Lieutenant is he takes reduced magic damage. So if you have magic damage people in your group, and you are a rogue, you really want to be the one focusing your damage on Lieutenant. If you're playing Subtlety, you probably want to be funneling your Eviscerates into the Lieutenant while your magic dealers are AoEing and working on the rest of the pack. Here, you can stop the unstable power casts by the Attendants, and that'll make sure that no swirlies get on the ground. So I'm able to stop one, but another cast gets off. It just happens. But ideally, if you can stop all the casts in this pull, it's just a patchwork pull. You just sit there and do your damage. We finish off the Spitefuls, and we go into the pull. I get my re-stealth. Here, you don't really want to pop a lot of big cooldowns right off the rip, because this first phase is so short. You also don't want to be focusing the adds down. You want to be bringing the boss over to the add and cleaving off the boss onto the add with Blade Flurry, and setting your focus kick or a mouse over kick to make sure that no casts go off from the add. And the reason for this is if you focus your main damage onto the add, the boss could get an extra intermission phase if you're so slow at killing the boss. And that really slows down the fight. Having to kill 4 more adds while you're taking a lot of damage makes the healing a lot more healing intensive. It's just not a good time. So here we get all the kicks. Whenever the mob that this boss spawns dies, it puts a bunch of swirlies on the floor. Same thing with the intermission adds. Every time you kill one of the adds, you get a lot of swirlies. So just make sure you're watching for that. This boss also has 2 frontal abilities. It has that Ancient Orb and the Cleave ability right there. So you don't want to be in the way of the orb, and you don't want to be in front of the boss when he's doing the cleave. Here I make sure that I am trying to cycle through these mobs, and you want to stay near each other to make it easier for the healer. I press my vial first as soon as I start getting a little bit low to heal up a little bit, and then when vial runs out, I use my feint to take even more reduced damage. You really want to cycle through your defensives. You don't really want to stack them at the same time unless you absolutely have to, and if you're in dire danger. So you want to use feint, vial, and then feint again after the vial ideally. I was a little greedy and I just used vial to save on energy right in the beginning. But ideally you want to use feint right at the beginning of this intermission, which I just did this time, so I wasn't greeting. And then when feint runs out, as soon as I start taking a little bit of damage again, if I get to a certain point in my HP, I'd use vial, which I just did right there. And that makes sure that I can stay healthy and sustain myself, and the healer doesn't have to stress out about me and can worry about the others if they're not getting enough healing. And then we just continue killing the fight. We're making sure we're not focusing the add down, we're just cleaving off the boss onto the add, and making sure that we're not getting any of the casts. I was going to blind that mob, because you can just blind one of the adds towards the end and you don't have to worry about it. But then I saw the druid charge into it and my blind would have been wasted. So we killed it anyways and it was fine. So this breaker, it can see in stealth, so you don't want to run past him. You want to wait for your tank to pull him. And I trigger these traps on the floor a little bit just to clear up some more space, because these frogs run around everywhere and you do need to dodge the swirlies. But if you're trying to dodge the swirlies and you have shit exploding around you, it's not going to be a good time. I also have Boon up for this pool, but I'm very scared to use it on this pool because I don't know if I'm going to die or not ever on that pool if I'm stuck in Boon. Like, if I get really unlucky and I get one frog to jump on me and then 4 seconds later another frog jumps on me, I have no defensive to live it 4 seconds later because my cloak ran out. So I wait to use my Boon until a little bit later here when we get into a bit of a safer spot. If you get chosen by the shoulder slam, you could use your evasion to completely negate the damage. So right there, I see a big knock, and mobs are trying to come in, and I use my Boon. I use my cloak to stay alive from a swirly there, and that is it. The only downside to using your evasion on the breaker is that you don't have evasion for the spitefuls after, so you have to really make use of your acrobatic strike range and make sure that you don't get one-tapped by the spitefuls, because they do an insane amount of damage. The higher key level you get, the more damage they do in one shot. So as soon as we walk into this room, I trigger the one trap again just to free up some more floor space. You don't want to grief your team by triggering the ones that are under your team. So you see, like, I try to take the trap over to where there's not really anybody standing. It just makes it a little bit more free on space. I have aggro of this frog for a very long time, but luckily he doesn't do a lot of damage, and I use my evasion. And then I notice the tank goes over to these breakers, which was the correct move. So as soon as he gets over to these breakers, I kidney the frog to be able to stay alive. I walk over here, I get my vanish back up, and I use my vanish to reset the aggro, so the frog gets aggro back to the tank. We continue killing these mobs just to go over to the third boss. So this is where the run almost gets completely thrown out. We had a pretty good run so far. We have 9 minutes on the clock. This is more than enough time to kill these 2 bosses, but let's see if we can see it on the VOD, because I could not find out what was going on here. So a little trick for this boss, you don't want to press your cooldowns on this first phase. You just want to maintain as high damage uptime as you can, because when she comes down, this is ideally when you want to be sending your third lust, but we didn't have lust here because we used it at very weird times. But if you wait until she comes down this first time, to use your Adrenaline Rush and your Shadow Dance, you should have it Adrenaline Rush and Shadow Dance for every time she comes down. And you'll see it makes a huge difference for boss damage, and is probably why we ended up timing this key. So we continue going. When you get the Frost Bomb on you, you have 2 seconds now with the nerf on this ability to get out of the ice before you start taking ticking damage. When she goes up in here, you need to get inside of these circles to avoid getting one-shot by the blast. And that is it for very simple mechanics, and it's just walk around the ring. So here, let's see if we can find out how our druid dies. Yeah, so there's our druid and just jumps off the ring. Just completely jumps off the ring. I didn't see that. I was so focused on the fight, and I see our healer is dead, and we're all taking in lots of damage right now. I have to cloak that off because our healer's dead. And I'm looking around frantically looking for where the body is so I can go res. Luckily, I get the res off right before. And then he just doesn't run into the circle. He gets in bear form and doesn't run into the circle. So I have to send another B-res on him. And then we're all about to die. So, anyways, I sent 2 B-reses on him. Luckily, he stayed up the 3rd time. Almost griefed the whole run. Almost a waste of time. But hey, mistakes happen. We don't judge. He jumped off the ring and then get in the circle fast enough. But it'd be like that sometimes. We saved it. We keep going. We get into the final bubble. The boss probably would have died before this intermission if the healer didn't die, because I could have done an extra 1.5 million damage and he would have died for sure. So here we go. We're going into 4th boss. This boss has a couple mechanics you need to watch out for. One, I have a really bad habit on this fight, because I might have a really bad habit just from my movement and period. I'm always hitting A and D in between all of my buttons, so I'm always stacking up that movement debuff. Luckily, as a rogue, we have a couple options to remove the debuff. We can cloak it off, or we can use our vanish. I like to save cloak on this fight in case I need to run through orbs to kill some of the shards that come out. The shards come out at 75%, 50%, and 25%, and it's very important you kill all of them, otherwise they explode and it will most likely wipe your entire party. I also opt to use my boon right at the beginning of this pull because I don't like using boon on these crystals because it makes you use your cloak sometimes if the orbs are coming into you. So you just got to make sure you focus down these things. We lose our shaman here, druid reses him, everything's good in the world again, and we're trying to milk our skull and crossbones buffs there. If you saw, I waited till the very last second to re-roll it because that's the best buff we can get, especially because we're running count the odds. We're waiting for the 50% phase here where we get some more shards. And here it is. We get really, really good shard placement here. Really, really good crystal placement. And you're able to just cleave all those down. That was the most ideal situation I think that we could have had. And again, you're just watching out for these orbs. I'm holding on to cloak until I absolutely need to use it. Like right there, I didn't look behind me. I almost got knocked back into an orb. That would have been my death 100%. Very important to watch behind you. That was just negligence on my part. I should have been more aware of where the orbs were before the knockback. We're getting our last set of crystals here, and I am going to sit on this hardened one. The hardened one has more HP than all the others, so I deal pretty good priority damage. So I make sure that the hardened is my target. And then we just continue doing it. Because I used my boon right on pull, I get a second boon usage there, so I get double the boss damage that boon would normally have done. I could have done more crystal damage if I used my boon for it, but then I would have had to waste my cloak most likely for an orb. So I get 2 boon usages in the fight. I get a bunch of IO, and all is good in the world. I did 96.4k overall, where the other people in my group did 84 and 83k. I think that's pretty good. We've been nerfed a couple times now. 96k overall sounds good. We timed the key with 9 seconds left. That's it for this video. If you like the content, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out the Twitch at twitch.tv/chirpytv. I'll see you guys next time.